So I would say any pressure is on just our organization, or I feel it from the members to say, what can I give them that's special? I know that sounds corny, but I don't think about it competitively, if that, you know what I mean? Absolutely. First place, fourth place, sixth place, like those things at the end, it's like, how much of that do you really have control over? But you have total control over the excellence that you produce, the training that you give, the details that you dig into, and the voice and the vision of what kind of, show you want to put together. Those are the things we have control over. So, this end of the season stuff for me, I don't think I'm nervous that way competitively, but I feel urgency from there's going to be a moment when I can't make it any better. And there's going to be a moment when I can't give one more instruction to make someone better. And that's the urgency I feel. It's less competitive than anything,
if you teach at that program that pays you X amount of dollars, so they expect X amount of things from you, then start a JV program or start a cadet program where maybe you could explore those skills there, and you continue with a pattern of maybe bringing in some additional people that maybe have that skill, and you can continue to learn from them.
Sometimes I might second guess myself. Like, it scares me. I always tell people, do the work that scares you, because it stretches you as a designer. It stretches you, as a choreographer. Do the stuff that's really hard, or, it's not that, you're not going to just see it everywhere. Just do the stuff that scares you. And I feel like with Paramount, Rick and Andria, like, you created like this, in a short time, this really cool legacy. And every year is literally different.
Hey everybody, it's Tim and Mary. Welcome to Call Me Beast. We are talking Winterguard tonight, specifically Paramount Winterguard. Such an amazing group of performers over many years, and Rick and Andria are here. So Mary, how are you?
I am doing great. I am so glad we're in our greatness era, because tonight we've got greats. I mean, they are great. I just, last year Paramount was my favorite color guard. I've not seen them live this year, but I can't wait to. But they are just, how do they do it all? It's just so amazing.
We're going to find out. So let's start by bringing in Rick Subel and Andria Foerch. Hey, Rick and Andria, how are you?
Hi, team.
Hello.
We're good.
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us tonight about Winterguard and about Paramount, all things Paramount. We're going to have lots and lots of questions for you. And anybody, if you're watching live, you can type those in the comments on the right-hand side. And so glad you guys are here. And we actually have two guest stars that have been brought in to be a part of this. So I'm going to bring them in now. Michael James and Stevo. How are you guys?
Hello. Good.
Hi, everybody.
Excited to be here.
So we have...
continues.
Say that again, Mary.
I said greatness era continues with our guest stars too.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. This is going to be awesome. So let's start by just Rick and Andria. Let's start with you. How's the season going? How are you feeling right now today?
Today we are excited in both ways. That it means that there's only 3 weeks left of the season. We are excited because we can see the finish line. We have that sort of finish line energy, but also it's been a doozy of a year, not, with life things and the world things and, all the things. And I think everybody kind of feels that. So, while we're not necessarily exhausted and in no way kind of like over it, but there is that thrill of like, we can see the finish line, and we can see where all of this work and all of this love that we've had to keep holding everything together will give us a sense of relax and release that in a couple of weeks. So we're excited. The team's very good, and they're just hitting their stride. There's a very challenging show this year, and it's one of those, it's like, it's going to take until Dayton for it to kind of finally be polished and ready and all of those kinds of things. And I think for students at this level, I think they accept and are eager always for that challenge. I always tell myself every year, we've got 9-year members, and I go, why do they keep coming back? And hopefully it's for that they can constantly keep growing, and when you've reached that level of like, can do anything, it's like, let's keep challenging them and just keep raising the stakes a little bit more. So we're excited for people to see it. I don't know how deep we want to go into that, but I'll let you do the questions. We're good.
Oh, we're going to get into it for sure. Andria, how are you?
I'm doing all right. We've had a challenging couple of weeks as a group emotionally, but we were excited to complete the Atlanta Regional this past weekend. That was a kind of a big hurdle for us to kind of get through, but definitely excited after the weekend. And we're looking forward to our rehearsal weekend coming up and to kind of dive into some more details and keep getting the show a little bit better and making a couple of adjustments and tweaks and things that you do towards the end. So yeah.
Absolutely. So Michael James, I know you do your usual wonderful job with all of your groups. How are you? Are you feeling that same last 3-week energy?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I mean, we're on spring break right now. So the last regional for us, at least in Florida, always comes at the end of our spring break. So we'll bring the kids in on Thursday and Friday for a couple long day rehearsals to get them back on the bike and, just remember the show. But we're used to it though. It's been that way for years. So.
Awesome. And Stevo, I think everybody knows who you are, but why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how you're feeling at this moment?
Hi, I'm Stevo. I am the co-director with Michael James at Oviedo High School, and feeling about the same as what Rick described. We are at the point of the season where I think we have the show set. We're just kind of tweaking things and cleaning things. It's kind of my favorite part of the season, to be honest, because I feel like my mind can calm down a little bit. I'm not losing as much sleep as I was earlier in the season, so it's getting better. The end is near for sure. So yes. Enjoying this last few weeks, enjoying the process, just trying to survive this next competition, if you will. So we've got some of our own hurdles over here. So.
And Mary, of course, you've been in the Winterguard community a long time. You and I have known each other a long time, and you know what it feels like to be at this point in the season.
I always do, and I always have to say that Tim always talks about how long we've been involved in this activity. Like I don't know, but anyway, this is my favorite part of the season too. I agree with Stevo too. I really enjoyed kicking a lot of people out of the gym and just say, let me have them for a little bit, a few hours, go and shop, go and do whatever you need to do. I'm going to be doing what I need to do here. And so it's my favorite part of the season too.
Spoken like a true technician. Everybody get out and let me clean these damn flags. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse online, everybody. If you have questions, type them in. If you have comments for Rick and Andrea or anybody else that's on there, and bring it in. So Mary, I didn't ask you if you had, but like, do you have a starting point where you'd like to ask Rick and Andrea about their work with Paramount or anything?
Well, I said in the introduction that they were my favorite color guard last year. I don't know what it was. It was like the artistry, the excellence, like the synergy all coming together. Like, how in the world did it all happen? Is it just the performers, the design? It's everything. I mean, it was just so incredible last year.
Thank you. I liked it too. I think I will preface everything by saying I feel lucky that not only do I have amazing talented performers, but it's performers who just love making what we make, and we compete, and there's that part of the excitement of what we do as an activity, but they're as honed into what it actually is that we're making as I am, and I really appreciate that, and they're willing to kind of go wherever we want to go because they know that's what they signed up for, and we take a lot of care with what that means because it's an absolute trust. They're not in it for a specific thing that it does for them other than the community that we create and the teaching and the education that we give them, but also the explorative nature of what they do. And for me, I just want them to feel like nobody else. I think I mentioned it a little bit in the intro, but we get a lot of students who come back year after year and they don't want to do the same show every year. They're like, we did that last year, or we did that trick last year, or we did that thing, whatever, and so it's always just, it's a challenge to us to say what's something new we can give them as an experience, so I feel like last year was very much the theme of the show was harbingers, people, voices of change or ideas of change. And, while those people may not experience the rewards of that, the ideas that they give to us cause us to do what we do now, so it's really kind of an homage a little bit in the sense of they gave us these flags and rifles and sabers and staging and whatever. And it's just like, well, what can we do differently with that? And maybe it was weird in some places or, not as approachable in some places, and that's okay. I do feel like, when we try to when we try to go off into the deep end, it does cause others to take that in. You know, the students themselves take in that approach or that idea, or audience members, and we don't realize just how much we're affected by other people's work. You know, I love pageantry. I feel like I've seen every show of all time, and it's like, you know, it's like feeding yourself this great art that we do. And I think that's, you know, what's so amazing and precious about it is how much we unspokenly inspire each other with the work that we do. So that was kind of last year's theme, and you know, we kind of went. You know, we went wherever it went, you know, and it did whatever it did. And, you know, and last year in leaving WGI, you know, I had my feelings and my thoughts, as everyone does, but, you know, I'm driving home from Dayton, which is like my favorite time because it's like that long 8-hour drive of like detoxing from the season. You know, I probably spend 6 hours of it in complete silence, but, you know, I left there just feeling like, I think I have something to say. And that idea of saying something, not even knowing what it was kind of the little nugget that we started building this season's show around. So,
Rick, question for you with your show designs and being such a competitive, independent, world-class program, right? Like you've become the creme de la creme of world-class. Do you feel pressure year after year coming up with new programs, coming up with new show ideas? And how's that process for you?
For the reasons I described, yes, but not for other competitive reasons. You know, I think the safest thing we can all do is put our blinders on and say, what is it that we do? What is it? Who are we? And what do we offer? And, you know, it is a comparative art, you know, but it's like, I love Michael James. And when we would write a lot together, like I would love that he would do something movement wise and it would inform something I would do, you know, equipment wise or whatever. But like, you know, and you know, Michael is singular in his approach as well. Though if I wouldn't have to know the group at all or who worked with it, but if I saw it, I'd say, I bet that's a Michael James show, because I think that's the best thing we can do is hone in on who we are and, you know, what are we trying to say in the 10, 20, 30 years that we get to do this work, you know? And I'm not saying like, not that it matters that way, but you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff, and I want each one of us to feel unique about it. So I would say any pressure is on just our organization, or I feel it from the members to say, what can I give them that's special? I know that sounds corny, but I don't think about it competitively, if that, you know what I mean? Absolutely. First place, fourth place, sixth place, like those things at the end, it's like, how much of that do you really have control over? But you have total control over the excellence that you produce, the training that you give, the details that you dig into, and the voice and the vision of what kind of, you know, show you want to put together. Those are the things we have control over. So, you know, this end of the season stuff for me, I don't think I'm nervous that way competitively, you know, but I feel urgency from there's going to be a moment when I can't make it any better. And there's going to be a moment when I can't give one more instruction to make someone better. And that's the urgency I feel. It's less competitive than anything, you know?
Yeah. What I love about you, Rick, is that I went back earlier this week, and well, it's only Tuesday. It felt like it's already Thursday. I went back and watched like your earlier shows, and I watched that film strip show, and I remember watching that live and going, you can tell that there was so much going on that you definitely had a voice from the get-go. Like even that, like the first show with the
Creep.
The paper, I call them paper dolls, whatever.
Right.
And I was like, you definitely have a vision and a voice, because I feel like a lot of color guards, when they come out brand new, especially when they come out world class, they're literally is like watching the, lack of a better term, top 40 music. It all sounds the same. And even in your early years, you did not let that deter you. You were like, well, okay, this is my next project. And it's like you created like this portfolio of art. I mean, come on. Like and then finally, like I forget the first time you won or the first time you got in the finals. I remember watching that show too. I was like, oh, I'm so happy for you guys. But 23, I remember talking to you. I was beside myself at headquarters because it could literally be something that you toured. And I ain't saying that to blow no smoke up your behind. You know me, but like, I might have been like a little, had a couple drinks by that time too. But anyway, it was just something that I felt that you've been working on that for years, and not that it was definitely not the pinnacle or the Paramount of what you know or what you know how to produce or create, but it was just you. I know sometimes I feel this way when a show goes off really well, whether it's competitively great or whatever. I don't care about that, but when people can sit back and go, and it just moves people. I love that. I love when color guards have their own identity, and Paramount has literally had their own identity since inception. So
that was the Drawn to Life, the Dawn show, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that one I feel like you could just watch over and over, and it does not. It stands every single time you watch it, just from the staging to the choreography to the simplicity but complex costumes. It's that show you can watch in different times, different angles, and something is always fresh.
You know, Michael, it's funny you mentioned that about, you kind of alluded to people outside of our activity, but like I actually, that like going into that season is the first time I thought of like, what if someone showed this to someone outside of our activity? What would they say about what this is as an art form? And I've been leaning into that ever since, because like people do, people, in the strangest of ways, I've had people make connections or reach through another friend of a friend of a friend who they may be in a professional dance world, and they're like, Color Guard, have you seen that group Paramount? Oh my gosh, someone sent me a video, and look, it's just so we don't think of like ourselves existing out of this activity, but it does. And I think like that is after doing it for a long time or whatever that means, but like there's always something to kind of re-inspire you. And that's been something that's re-inspired me the last few years, is if someone outside of our activity and in the art world saw this, what would they say about us as art,
Cheerleading, by the way, watches Winterguard shows and marching band shows, because I'm a cheerleading fan, elite, like All-Star, they have now studied Winterguard and marching band, where transitions are now a thing. Before, they used to run and cross and go to the next spot. If you watch the elite groups now, transitions are part of their show or their routine, all because of they've been watching. I spoke to the directors of those programs because I'm friends with some cheerleaders, and they tell me that they watch Color Guard videos to get inspiration about how we transition, how we make forms, and how we do things. So it's funny that you say that. We do have a lot of effect in other art forms.
And and I think the reason why, and I don't know if we can name drop on here, I don't know all the legalities, but David Byrne from the Talking Heads, if you can all remember when he came to visit WGI, and then he did the contemporary color experiment, then we went and saw him on tour, and he had percussionists marching in formation. And like, and I'm not saying anything. This is like being inspired by another thing, but someone from a different art genre looked into and leaned into this thing, said, and it echoed into their work, And I just think, to Stevo's point, like, I just think that's really cool, and like, we're all trying to check the lists and do the things and be as good as we can competitively and all that stuff. But like, we have to also stop and think like this can exist. Like it can go out there, and I
beyond
think
us.
And I think that's the larger pressure that I keep putting on myself recently, is like I want it to live in the world, somewhere where someone may appreciate a flag that goes up in the air, but also say, look how beautifully that was crafted or put together or whatever.
But how well they move, and how well the design concepts and the artistry and the excellence. I mean, I feel like it doesn't exist in many, it exists in many art forms, but it's so unique. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I, like you, Stevo, see cheerleading too, and I go,
it's changed just the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm talking about like, are we allowed to name drop? Like Top Gun, like the top of the cheerleading world. I know for a fact they've watched Winterguard and marching band videos.
It's awesome.
Interesting.
I love that goal about getting outside to the world. I mean, it's a lot of pressure too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's pressure, because if you're being authentically what's in your heart and your soul when you create, it might be hard to like get those ideas and workshop them with the kids, and and figure all that kind of stuff out. But if it feels right to you, I never Sometimes I might second guess myself. Like, it scares me. I always tell people, do the work that scares you, because it stretches you as a designer. It stretches you, as a choreographer. Do the stuff that's really hard, or it's not that you're not going to just see it everywhere. Just do the stuff that scares you. And I feel like with Paramount, Rick and Andrea, like, you created like this, in a short time, this really cool legacy. And every year is literally different. I can't look back at 1 year and go, nah, good and well, they don't already done that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and just, me, I'll talk all the talk. I don't care. So just come at me if you want. But
there is a way, you know what I mean? And
you have your toolbox, obviously, the way you create or whatever, but it's always, it feels so organic every time. It doesn't ever feel like the same show. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we go for. But I think there is a way to allow your identity to be expressed through the exploration of different kinds of stuff, because I feel like the trick would be, well, I want to do this kind of thing this year. And you abandon a core identity, and then that's where it can feel all over the place. And you're like, well, but who is the group and what is that? There is a way to kind of infuse your essence into this exploring different kinds of stuff, but I feel like when we started, I wanted to make sure we did have a shape-shifty chameleon feeling, because I didn't want to just be like a guard that only did that,
But your core is still who you are. Like, you can still watch that group and say, oh, that's Paramount with whatever show.
It's important to create, we talk a lot about to like a lot of younger instructors too, but creating style and identity, that happens through design, but that also happens through the process of cleaning. I'm not traditionally the creative person on the team, but I consider myself a creative type in the fact that I can see what his vision is. And then, from a cleaning perspective, I have to ensure that the students understand that, that the staff understands that, I don't teach dance class. Rick doesn't teach dance class. Those students move because, we have, a wonderful dance technician, and we have, choreographers that come in and help do that too. It's a team of people to do that. But all of that with the understanding of, stylistic approach and identity. And that's not just any, to be able to watch a color and say, I know who they are based on what they're doing is really important to us. And I think there's, several color guards that often have that identity and create that, which is really the goal, is to have this unique voice, amongst a sea of people. But I think a big part of that is definitely like how the technician staff can help make that vision come to life as well. When we're cleaning parts, it has to look like the designer wrote it. It can't just be clean. It also has to look like that, and I will say we have choreographers that don't do traditional shapes. Rick doesn't do that. Our, Katie Hopkins doesn't do that. Mike Rosales, John, they don't do that. And so we have to clean those parts and make these, kind of these shapes. But what's great about it at least for Paramount is, we like seeing the human aspect of it. We like, there's going to be, intrinsic differences between person to person as they're performing. And I think that's really important that we allow for that to happen in the cleaning process. Katie has a lot to say about it as well.
He agrees.
I mean, I also feel that, it's very obvious about like where you're training and where you marched. Like, looking back at, I have my notes here, and looking back at Appalachia, there was a moment in the show when the guard is like in a block, and it literally, and I'm not saying you took it from them, but I know I have inspiration from old school color guard, and I could definitely see harking back to Emerald Marquis. It just reminded me of Emerald Marquis 97, the walking show.
Yeah.
Not that they did any kind of walking motion or anything, but just that moment they hit that block, and I was like, and I never noticed that until I watched it a couple of days ago. I was like, I can see where his inspiration and who fed you when you were young. It was the same thing, when I was coming up. There were also these color guards I would always watch, and I'm just like, oh my God, I love the way how they presented this particular thing or whatever it was, and I just feel like, you took that all in when you were younger, when you were marching, and you just kind of, made your little gumbo, and there it is. So,
yeah, I mean, I love Emerald Marquis. I mean, I would, you could probably, stick me right now with a needle and Emerald Marquis would come out. But yeah, I was actually joking with Dale Powers about this recently. In 1993 is the first time I saw Winterguard. I had a friend who took me to the Pensacola Regional, and you remember like Pensacola Regional was like San Jose Raiders, Pride of this. I mean, everyone was there, and so it was like a smorgasbord. I got to see like all the best guards in the world, and I remember Emerald at that time. It was their version of Bolero, not Raiders version, but both groups were there, and it was neat to see, that whole, I love those couple of times that you could see two groups completely interpret the same thing differently in a whole different way. But, Emerald was rough. They were doing some really, really crazy stuff. And I remember they ended the show in that straight line, but the Sabres all threw a 7 going into that like 2-step straight line. And like, it was a hot disaster and it was rough. And like, one of the performers had like a broken nose. It was bleeding as they're walking up the floor. And I just remember going like, I like that one, like you could see that it was like, they are doing whatever they do and they are holding on, they'll go for the risk. And, in that time, I mean, they must've come in like 5th place or something. And they ended up like, 2nd place at WGI, but like they had these huge pendulum swings there because they would explore all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden it would like come together at the end and it would be what it needs to be. And, as a performer there, I mean, I think like what I said earlier about like, I loved marching there because every weekend I'd learn something obviously that's the first color guard I ever marched in, but like every weekend, every year, it was something new and exploratory and just, yeah, it definitely fed my imagination. And even like when I got older, in my age out year, because when I was the last class of age outs, but like, I knew that I was going to teach there the next year. They had already asked me and I was so excited. I cried every time I thought about it. It was a dream come true. But, like we'd get to parts in the show and Greg Lagola would be like, what do you want to do here? And I'd be like, well, what if we did this? And, but he would have real discussions about like, now how do you make it look like your own thing? And and what is that, what is all this? And he would ask all the right questions that would make me think, what those thoughts were. And I don't know. I just remember that from very early on, like whatever I do, it's got to be my own thing,
Question for you two, Rick and Andrea, because you guys are kind of like this power couple of WGI, and kind of such a good matchup. Because Rick, marching under you, loved your choreography. Obviously, it's not like everybody else, right? It's very unique. It's very body oriented, and Andrea, having this good understanding of that, was able to relay those information to try to make us look like you and clean us and achieve it at a high level. Do you feel, I'm going to be like Barbara Walters right now or Wendy Williams, do you feel like there's ever been any conflict because you two come from this different mindset, but you both are running this high elite program? Like, has there been any kind of things that you going home and you're kind of not feeling good about it?
Well, we learned early on that we should not talk work at home.
I was gonna say,
because I think when we first started teaching together and we were still kind of in the beginning stages of dating and all of that, like there was a little bit of tension. But people, like, they don't believe us when I say we do not talk about work at home unless we say, okay, we're gonna talk about work right now. Let's pause and kind of regroup a little bit. But we typically do not talk about work when we're at home. And I think it's healthy for the relationship. We talk about it in the car on the way home, maybe from rehearsal, or, we might just kind of pause. But I would say from the hours of when I come home from my 9-to-5 job and, whatever, we don't talk about color unless we say, we're going to talk about this right now. And then we kind of move on. So I think that was probably a healthy choice for our relationship early on. And it works really well for us.
Yeah, setting boundaries.
Yeah, I also think for Paramount, we just share core principles about what it all is and what it means and what it does, and so anything that conflicts with that, because we're competitors. Like I do have those moments where I cry and go, everyone's gonna hate it and think it's stupid, and I'm not lying to you, and then she's just like, she doesn't even say anything. She's like, lets it go, and then 3 days later we might bring it up again, but that willingness to have space in our own space away from that, I think is very healthy, like Andrea said.
And having each other support each other, I'm sure helps a lot too.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask about.
Okay. Actually, I have a question, Mary. I'm sorry. Do you want? Sorry, it took me a minute to figure out how to get back in. We have some really good questions from people watching. If you're watching, please say hello, make comments or questions for Rick and Andrea or anybody else that's here. Here's a good question from Scott for Rick and Andrea. Rick, can you speak to your design choices to often use unique flag shapes that often turn into prop-like equipment?
Yeah, I mentioned kind of in that Harbinger show, like, everything we have was given to us. You know what I mean? Like, someone wrote the coolest rifle work ever before we all started writing the coolest rifle work we think we're making. And people have kind of played maybe with like curved rifle shapes, and there was a ton of years where Michael Shapiro would have like a saber hilt and a rifle butt, and like just we've all explored versions of that. But I think for me, and I mean this, and maybe it doesn't make any sense, I like to see it that way. Like if Paramount did a movement phrase and all of a sudden there was a blade hand there like that, I wouldn't like the way that felt there, because that's just, we all have our preferences. And so for me, like exploring the flag thing, there's certain like restrictions maybe you can put on yourself as a designer. Like I think about when Pride did What's Left, right? And they did so much on the left hand. It's like, well, that was a choice that put restrictions that caused it to happen. And then all the design was built around this sort of restriction, which sounds like a negative, but it's not. It incites a new thought or whatever. So for me, I think that's kind of what it is. Ultimately, it just starts with, I just like to see something a little different, and what it does then is it causes the writing to kind of approach differently.
I would say, and I'll from a technician perspective, I've seen Rick do this process, and it's really cool to watch it from my perspective. Like in 2016, Rick said, I don't want to write I want to write a single flourish. Not a single flourish is going to go in this show. That was one of the things that he did to challenge himself as a choreographer. In 2017, we said, let's play with this whole concept of sharing equipment. You watch that show, the whole flag feature is literally a constant exchange back and forth and passing back and forth with the flag. So like those ideas of the flag shape started back in 2016 of I don't want to run a flourish, I want to share equipment. 2018 was I want to use my uniform as a prop. So I think those are all different kind of concepts that have really been around for quite a bit for Rick, just trying to challenge himself as a choreographer and as a designer, on like how to do different things.
So I want to jump in here because that's really, I love the way you just explained that. We had one of these same conversations with Michael Gaines a few weeks ago, and I asked him this sort of same thing. Like when you have a guard or a group sitting in front of you that can do anything, that must be intimidating. And so he talked about this very thing of sort of making decisions to put some sort of parameters on what you're doing. He talked about this year Pride is in this circle and they never go outside of it, and how challenging that was. And like they gave themselves a challenge. So Andrea, it sounds like you're kind of describing that. Like, we have all of this talent and possibilities. Let's give ourselves a little bit of a parameter to work. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like an outline to kind of guide yourself towards something. And I think that's helpful as a designer. So when you think the sky's the limit and anything can go, it gets a little bit overwhelming. But when you have some parameters or some guidelines around it, it helps to kind of inform how the designer is going to write a show.
Rick, do you think of it that way, or do you just sort of organically do it?
I do, for me, like I said before, I mean, I'll caveat everything with like the way I make what I make is the way I see what I make, and every designer should be very different in that regard. We're all built differently. Our eyes work differently. Some people like satin, some people like velvet, like we're all different in terms of our tastes and what we like and what we do. So the first thing is always just, I like it. I like the way that looks, and it makes me feel good when I work with that, But those creative games, like if I say creative games, we called them just parameters a couple of seconds ago, but I think of them as creative games, and I think about it in the sense of, creating like original content or original, concepts. I can see the movie Avatar in the theater, and then I can go, oh, let's do Avatar. And it's like, well, that's somebody else made all that from scratch, So it's like, okay, well, what am I informed by from this thing? And, and so it starts like that, like Pride, for instance, this year, it's like, we want a round floor. That maybe they started with that. Maybe that was the first nugget they started with. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean in terms of a concept? What does that round floor sound like now? So you're building around these things that you air quote know. And so for me, when I think about those creative games, Andrea mentioned like I don't want to do a flourish, or last year it was I want the flag to slide up and down the pole the whole time because I want to see what that does. Or can you tell a difference from a perspective when the dark side slides to the end and the pole is lighter? Then do you feel that? And so those ideas kind of start like little nuggets, and for us, we kind of can build all the way around that because it's the first thing that you air quote know you want to do, or not do, whatever those parameters can be when you start. Because like Andrea said, when you say it could be anything you want, and it's like, whoa, that's scary. Mm-hmm. That's like, and not to like bring it back to Paramount show this year, but that's shouting into the void. It's like, I don't know what we're going to do, but I'm going to shout into the void and see what comes back. And we kind of built a whole show around that too, so.
That's cool.
I think too, when you're doing something different, you sometimes can't rely on what's always been done or what you've done in the past or what like this really forces like a creative avenue and different avenues that you have to explore. And that could be a collaborative process as well, which I think is really important in this activity, that process.
I think so. And, I mentioned it lightly just now, but like sometimes we don't always know what we want, but we definitely might know what we don't want. And you can set those up from the beginning, and that'll also inform other brainstorm, I call them non-negotiables, or I'll write it on like a Post-it and put it above my computer, like keep these things in mind. Or when we have a design call, it'll be like absolutely none of what's on this list, because then as brainstorm ideas start to come into play and converse, it's like, well, it bounces off of these things that we know we either do or don't want, So I like to, even without a concept, it's like I want to start with as many of those things as possible, because then all things will kind of, whether you even know what the concept is, if you know what you want it to do or say or be explored, then ideas that will benefit that or will grow that will stick with it, and other things that don't will just bounce off.
So what's on your Post-it notes?
Well, the Post-it that's always on my computer, except for when I'm traveling, is make things you want to see in the world. Not everybody wants to see in the world, but you know, what's inspiring for you to share with other people.
Okay, I want every person that has ever worked with a color guard or is doing a color guard now to hear that and put that Post-it note on their own computer. Because I love that concept, and I feel like, Rick, it's understandable, but a lot of times people start by copying, but that's so frustrating to watch because then it's all so samey, right? So I love these concepts you guys are sharing about your own unique voice, and I wish we could find a way to empower young designers to figure out how to do that. Do any of you guys want to speak to that?
I feel like Michael's groups have done that too forever. Like,
absolutely.
I don't know if you have it on your computer, Michael, but I feel like you've done that forever. Like it's really, it's a different voice. It's not somebody else's voice. It's your voice, and I love it.
My computer froze for a split second, so I don't know what happened. Seriously, I was like this.
I feel like you've done that for a long time. Like you've really, you may not have a Post-it note, but you have really done that for a long time. Had your own voice, not somebody else's voice, really promoted the activity in that way for sure.
I try.
No, he does. He's trying to be humble. He does a really good job of finding the students' identities and kind of figuring out what works for those teams that they can kind of latch onto, or maybe push them out of the comfort zone. With our programs that we've been doing, obviously you have to think about your cast, right? You have to think about the students that you're teaching. Are they able to achieve this show? Do we have the right numbers for it? How do we approach this? So same with, Rick and Andrea, there are limitations, but from those limitations, something grows out of that. But he does a really good job. With Oviedo especially, we've just kind of collaborated, kind of had conversations throughout the year, and we'll kind of look at our team and be like, okay, do you think we can kind of do this? Do you think we have the ability to do that? Maybe we need to change this a little bit. And, he'll come up with an idea, and then we'll be like, ooh, maybe not this year. Let's pocket that one. So, I've been with MJ since 2001. So kind of realizing and working. Yes, he was 5 years old and I was just born. Um, I kind of know where his mind goes, and I kind of, working together for this long, we kind of just know how each other works now. It's there's a lot of trust, obviously. We come up with ideas, and sometimes we're like, it's a lot of play at this point. You know what I mean? We just play, we workshop, we see what works, we see what sticks. But yeah, I think it all starts from in high school land, seeing what we have.
When we first started, the Post-it note that was above Rick's computer, not first, but maybe like kind of middle pathway, the Post-it note had 3 things on it. I can only remember the first 2 right now, but do we like it and will it fit the students? And that was actually really important for us to continue as we're trying to look at shows. We were teaching a lot of high school groups together and some other independent groups. We had an independent A group and an independent open group as well. But is it something that we enjoy, but it also will it fit the students? And that was a really important part. And I would say even the Paramount students too, we foster an open dialogue of creativity and the organization. A lot of times in creating, it's okay. And if Rick's writing a part, if someone says, hey, it feels really good to do it like this, I'm like, okay, let's try that. And so that's kind of the part of the process as well. But sometimes the students say, we would like to do something that has this kind of feeling to it, maybe something a little bit lighter, maybe something a little bit darker, whatever. Those sometimes will inform maybe the direction that we might move in. But I think in general, we have to like it first. And then the second is, does it fit the students or will it fit the members? I think that's probably a really important thing that you were just talking about as well, Stevo.
Yeah. We try to I call it the audition or in workshopping part of the season where, anything's up for grab. I like to go in with a pretty strong idea about what I want the season to do or say, maybe a couple of concepts where it could fit down one of those avenues. But for music, stylistic things, we try on a bunch of stuff, and, we'll be warming up. They'll do a warm-up song and I'll see the way their bodies react to that and not that. And that's how you can kind of tell, if you go in there with all the eggs in one basket, what happens if it doesn't fit? Then you're wrestling with that all season. So, I mean, there is and again, I prefaced everything with I understand that we have created a magical situation with what we have at Paramount, but I think part of that is how it got there was we try to make sure it fits on them everything we do is bespoke to the performer.
And circling back to pressure, I think that's the pressure that I feel as an instructor, as a choreographer, part designer is how can I give the best possible product every single time? And I think the pressure is more coming from myself as to think, am I doing enough for these kids? Am I giving them the best possible thing that I can come up with at this point? So I think that's where my pressure comes from mostly.
Well, I will get to the point in it as fast as I can, but when I was marching, I love just how, and then the 90s were the most magical part of color guard ever. I mean, every single group was so richly unique and different, almost to the point of you would be offended if what you did felt like the next group. You were so much trying to be specialized and create identity that way. But I always loved the Canadian guards. Now, again, this is before YouTube, and maybe some people had their hands on some videos, but it's the way they choreographed their style, the way they used equipment, choreography, everything about it just felt, I could see that it was branded completely different than other things I had seen in the States. And then it dawned on me that they didn't have access to CS all the time. So they had to create a language that was unique to them, So going back to that idea about younger instructors, it's all students are new at some point and they only know what you teach them. And there are fundamental truths that we all try to abide by in terms of get, rotation on a plie and stretching through the arch of the foot when we pointed and, all of those, or locking the dip or, maybe there's some still slight variations of East Coast, West Coast released, push or push then release or both, whatever those things, tabletop in the West, we still have some signature things, but what it actually does, that new student will learn what you teach them, so if that program that you're creating and developing already explores an identity or a thing, they're just going to assimilate that, and I don't know, I think there's room for that, be your own thing, from the beginning.
I had a great conversation with a former Paramount student and now is a guard director in the area, and he's so good at training kids to achieve at skills. And we were talking about, like staging shows, and that's just something that he's not comfortable doing. And I said, you weren't good at throwing a rifle at one point either, but you learned how to do that. You practiced how to do that. And you weren't good at writing choreography at one point, but you got better, and now you know how to do that. From a staging and designing and those creative things, you can teach yourself how to do that, or you can learn by observing, studying, watching, having conversations with, doing those things. And I think that's really probably an important thing for newer designers or people that say, I just can't do it. I can't do what Rick does. Well, Rick didn't always know how to do that either. There was people that he learned from on how to do that. We didn't always have, like right now, Rick stages and does equipment choreography for a good portion of the show with a couple of other choreographers that come in, and movement choreography. We bring those people in as well. But Rick does a lot of that himself now, but that wasn't something that we started with. The first year in 2011, we didn't have, Rick wasn't staging the show. We brought in someone to stage the show for us, and do those things. And so there is a learned process as well along the way, and I think, he got his feet wet by doing it with, some different color guards in the area that we knew were beginning and weren't national bound necessarily, but it takes practice to figure out how things move, but also studying how does staging work, having conversations with people who do drill and staging and talk to them about that, looking at other things like, as Stevo was saying, how cheerleaders watching color guard, but you can look at cheerleading videos, you can look at, movement pieces on a stage to see how they move around, so you can get inspiration from a lot of different places, but those are things that you can learn the same way that you learned how to throw the six, how to do choreography, how to do that. So you can have a voice there too. So I think all of those things, just don't be scared to do it, but you shouldn't walk into a world-class color guard and be staging for the first time in your life. Like, that's not going to work for you, that won't work well, so to figuring out how to practice those skills with, different color guards.
I think you bring up a really good point about being scared and fear of failing, fear of not being accepted, right? That voice not being accepted. And I think that might be where, some of the newer designers or choreographers, drill writers, whatever it may be, where they start looking like other people because they know that voice has been accepted for so long, or that's the voice that's being rewarded. So I'm going to try to emulate that voice. And we see that a lot. And I see a lot of people that they're not even being inspired. It almost feels like just a copy and paste.
Yeah.
And I feel like when that happens, we start losing those unique voices, right? Because we're scared of our own voices. We're scared of failing, or we're scared of experiencing those not so, I wouldn't even say unsuccessful seasons, but maybe not rewarded as handsomely as if I did something similar to someone that got a really high score the year before. And I think that's that fear, that being scared, is where we get some of the similar voices.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I feel super lucky in my color guard life that I was able to work with a lot of great people who were okay with watching me flounder and laughing probably in the corner, but then also going up and being like, hey, I don't want to change who you are because I can see you have something unique about you, but you have no idea what you're doing. And it was okay because, like you said, maybe those weren't high pressure situations that I put myself into. And not to say that people shouldn't go for the shoot for the moon out of the gate, but like in any other art form, right? How many times has a painter failed before they created something beautiful? How many times has a musician failed? Like, imagine like, I don't know, imagine if Beyonce went back and listened to her 13-year-old little demo she made. And it's like, oh,
killing it. She still killed it.
I mean, but like, those are steps. Those are long steps, and and it is an unfortunate burden of what we do affects other people, so there's always that burden of like, you want it to achieve a certain thing and you want it, that you're not practicing with robots, you're practicing with people, so there's that inherent stress all the time. But I do feel like, if there was more grace in the failure of younger instructors, then they would be able to cut their teeth the right way that a lot of us were able to do. I don't want to say back in the day, but like those times change, and success driven ideas don't allow for that kind of room to really let a student become themselves. So
yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I'm so glad there was no smartphones when I first show. I ever, choreographed or staged. It was awful. Like, I mean, but I didn't know any better. And I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread for me. And still to this day, I still have like the first time I, had a guard that was like in the top 5 at circuit championships. I still have it. It's right there. But it was one of those things that, just like you said, I've watched a lot of videos, and I would just take all these little nuggets and everything from different guards and then create my own voice. But, I tell kids that, if they really want to be a designer or become really good in this activity, you need to teach kids that you got to start from the bottom. Because I don't think if you're trying to go straight to, a color guard that's already has a certain skill set and they're very good, you didn't start that. Like, you need to go to like in the hood somewhere or in the cornfields and start with little Susie over here that like literally is standing pigeon-toed, and she thinks that's turnout, and like figure out how to teach kids that don't have anything to start with. Because if you can do that, then you can start building a foundation of knowing what it takes to take a color guard to the highest level. Because I know a lot of these young instructors, they want these kids right away. I want them to do like a 360 into a roll on the ground, and catch between their legs with their flag. Yeah, but that girl can't even do a grand plie without falling over. Like, you got to start, from ground zero. Don't try to give them the same dance warm-up that you are doing again. You're independent world-class color guard, because little Amanda over there can't do that. That's why kids get so frustrated and want to quit, because you're asking them to literally do some craziness that you've been doing for 4 months. And that's not fair to young kids. So I always tell young instructors, start from square one, first, whatever it is going to be, and you build their bodies, until they get to a certain point. Then you can start introducing all that hard stuff. And then even, I just feel like they want to skip the, I don't want to say the easy. It's not easy. They want to go straight to like, I got this really good color guard right now. You got to build it from the bottom. That's the only way.
Well, and two, for one, I've been kind of casually observing the activity as like, what's industry and what's artistry, and that's the same in everywhere you go. But you mentioned to go out to the cornfields and go to that school that has like nothing, and but I distinctly remember in my past, I must have been 19 or 20, putting a show together or whatever, and like not, it wasn't great. And I remember talking to the band director about like, what's going on? It's like, you need to give me some grace, because you only pay me $100 for the whole year. You give me $100 for the whole 12 months of working your program. Let me figure this out, But nowadays are different. You jump into a program that pays X amount of dollars, they want X amount of whatever that is. Mm-hmm. And so, not to say that that's none of those things are deserved. I'm not saying that at all. But to Michael's point, though, if you need a place to cut your teeth, maybe not have so many of that, where the pressure is so much that you know what I mean? You're always so stressed out about not exploring your voice or your uniqueness or something different or whatever.
I'll say 2 things on that too. So one is, if you teach at that program that pays you X amount of dollars, so they expect X amount of things from you, then start a JV program or start a cadet program where maybe you can explore those skills there, and you continue with a pattern of maybe bringing in some additional people that maybe have that skill, and you can continue to learn from them. So those cadet programs or those JV programs can be great ways for instructors who are already leading really successful programs that bring in other designers to grow their own skill set with maybe their with other color guards. So I think that's an option too. And then Michael, back to what you just said, I had a really great conversation with a director for a guard that just got promoted to world class this year. And, he was talking about, how do I go from open to world? And I don't feel like we're ready for it. It was kind of, this really fast track of how they got there. And I said, well, you have to have your own unique voice. And that was something that, he was aware of. But he said, I think I need to spend a good amount of time training their bodies to move like a world-class, performer. And it's less about the tricks under the toss and more about how they move their bodies. And it's worked really well for them this year. I'm really proud of the progress that they've made. And he spent the first 2 months of the season just dancing with them. And I think that's been a really big success for them. And that's still a big jump to go from open to world. It's a huge jump. It's not the same, in my opinion, to go from A to open as it is from open to world.
Oh, wow.
The expectations are different, and so the fact that he spent so much time making sure that they looked confident moving their bodies allows their equipment book to be better too. And I think that was a really important lesson I want everybody to hear that. Like, that is this key to success for this particular program, and I thought that was a really poignant observation that this person made, and it's proven to work out well for them.
I think that's for everybody. I think that
true
movement body thing, Oviedo this year is a little bit younger as far as experience goes, and we had to wheel it back in to be like, how do we get these kids to be open class performers, right? So we had to rewind back, and you're right. The first month we did dance class every day. And now, like, at first I'm like, okay, is it working? Am I cashing in on this? Am I cashing in on this work? Am I getting out what I need from it? And now it's starting to show up. All that training, that confidence is really starting to come out of them. So the investment that you put in may not show up right away, but boy, when it shows up, it really does start to show. So we felt the same way. We had to go back to, how do we make them look like this level? How do we make the younger kids look like the seniors? So.
I think it's interesting because I feel like we hit like the 90s in Winterguard and everybody got better at movement.
Oh, yeah.
So once you hit around 97, 98, 99, because when I was coming up, like Seminole High School, the first year they went to Dayton, I wasn't there. I was dancing in New York, right? So even in 94, they went to Dayton. I didn't go because I was doing Shakespeare in the Park in St. Petersburg. So I finally got my first chance to go to World Championships in 1996 after I moved back from Salt Lake City. And I was sitting there with Adam. He just giggled at me. And I just thought it was me. I had nobody else. I was just dumbfounded at how people didn't move well. And then until you saw, certain teams that moved really well, like Marquis and whoever. And I was like, oh God, they move like football players or whatever. And I felt like movement got better, but now I feel now it's starting to go back to, what is the biggest trick I can give my kids?
I think
usually in a moment that doesn't make sense in your show, but that's a whole nother story.
And I think that trend is coming to, Michael, like one group does it. And so they say, oh, they were successful, so we have to mirror that, right? It's all about how you learn from each group. And, I always, talk to young instructors or any instructor, like when we talk about, well, how do they get credit for it? And I'm not getting credit for it. I'm like, how do you know they're getting credit for it? That might be the thing where they're not getting credit for it, but you see them doing it. So you think that they're successful because of the overall, thing. It's like, well, the overall package is what makes it successful. It may not be that thing that you really adhere to, but maybe it's actually not helping them. So I think, understanding like where success is. And, I always talk to our circuit a lot. Like, we have an education director for our circuit and she's great. But a lot of times it's like, well, how do I know if my show is going to be successful? And the answer is always like, well, the sheets will inform you. Are you doing things that look at the sheets and what the sheets are asking for you? And that will help inform if you're going to be successful or not. And you have to be able to say that,
Exactly. But
okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mary.
No, I just feel like what Michael does. I mean, there's so many tricks that sometimes I'm awed by it, but I'm also sometimes disturbed by it.
So we have to start wrapping this up soon, which I hate because this has exceeded anything I hoped it would be. You guys are so smart, and it's like a little clinic that I don't want it to stop. But we have one question from someone watching. They asked really early on, and it's completely off the subject a little bit, although it's not, because you guys have started talking about, here's how I decided to train, here's how I decided to start writing. But I want you to speak to this specific question. This person says, I've accepted a first instructor job for the upcoming fall season. It's been a long time since I've been active in the color guard world. So any advice? So I think you've been giving this great advice to this person this whole time, but do you have anything specific for somebody that's been out of the color guard, they're coming back to work with the guard this fall? Any specific advice for this person?
Did you say it's a first-time instructor or their first time coming back after a while?
I think it's a first-time instructor.
My first thing is you can't wing it ever. You can't wing a dance class. You can't wing an equipment technique session. You can't wing a writing session. Like, you have to go in with a plan and then have 2 more plans when those plans don't work out because of where the students may be at in their trajectory. So, a lot of planning is what I'm gonna say. Be prepared for everything.
I think that's. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. No, go ahead.
I think making plan is great. The second thing is a lot of times newer instructors take over kind of younger and newish programs, and students don't learn fast. And learning is a skill. So teaching your students how to learn is going to be really something that benefits you in the long run. So like early on band camp, teaching them how to learn, quickly, or the way that you're going to teach is going to be something that benefits you down the road, because writing a show for new students who take a long time to learn can take 10 times longer than students who learn quickly. So teaching them how to learn, and you might just want to teach them a couple skills, like here's some cones, we'll do those later. Here's a couple wind up tosses or some pop, so a couple skills that you can incorporate into your choreography when you start teaching down the road as well.
Yeah. And then the third point, I guess, would be like create a culture, whatever that means, a culture of fun, a culture of, I had such a good time. I want to come back tomorrow and next year and 4 years later when they're actually going to be the best they're going to be in that program, but also a culture where they're okay to be unashamed of trying stuff, like almost to the point of like what we were talking about before about creativity, but like, when a student is afraid to throw it, they're never going to get past any barriers, so it's just like this environment is a completely safe space to fail and try. And then it's also a place where we celebrate all of those little, successes, when that new freshman gets that 45 toss, the whole place, applauds, and that senior goes up and like, I knew you had it in you. I could tell you're meant for this. Like whatever that culture is, because like if you're always restarting every year, you're not going to go anywhere. Everything you're going to do is built one step on top of the other, and you're wanting to have that 4-year senior. You want to have 20 of them in the color guard. That's when you're going to be incredible. But it starts with just what kind of culture is it. I
think first-time instructor, director of the program, finding resources, right? It's a lot of pressure. It's overwhelming. Finding someone that's maybe taught for a while that or the circuit that you guys are involved with, they may have a program where you can reach out to other directors to get some information. Having a mentor definitely helps. Luckily, I had Michael James growing up, and I had so many other mentors, and I was able to march all these incredible places that I learned and gathered all that information. But having someone that you can call or have conversations with to help you, kind of guide you, definitely will make that easier for you.
Okay, awesome. So we need to start wrapping this up. Unfortunately, Rick and Andrea, I don't want to keep you longer than the hour. I told you that would be all it would be. So really quickly, I want to go around. I want everybody to say one final thing about Paramount, about Winterguard, whatever. So like Mary, we'll start with you. What would you like to say either to Rick and Andrea or to anybody that's watching, and sort of wrapping up your feeling about this whole conversation?
Well, I'd like to say from all the folks that are here, the greatness that is here is I really enjoy learning about process, that it is a process. It's okay to be a process. You don't come out of the gate, being a winner. It's always going to be a process of training. It's always going to be a process of learning. And I really got that today, that all of these people, whether you're a new instructor or been around 150 years, Tim, like all of them can take a process. And that is the most important thing.
Are you saying I've been around 150 years, Mary?
Close.
Oh, wow. I guess I have. Stevo, what would you like to say in closing, either about Paramount or about this conversation?
Yeah, for me, I'm just super thankful. Paramount is a product of Rick and Andrea, and I've been so fortunate to have marched under Rick and Andrea and been able to be taught by them. And they actually influence my voice when I come up with choreography. And they continue to influence me and a lot of other people on how we approach the art, along with Michael James, obviously. But I'm so appreciative and thankful for their voices, because it allows me and other people to express our own. So can't wait to see Paramount in Dayton. I'm always so happy to see you guys.
There's no age out, Stevo. You could still come give it a shot.
You told me at BOA Orlando that I was not going to make the line.
All right, we're done. No, I'm kidding.
Moving on, Michael James.
Well, there's nothing I can say to Rick and Andrew that I have not already told them. I mean, I've known Andrea since she was a freshman in high school. But I'm so proud of you guys, what you have created, that legacy there. And when SAPA comes out with a legacy project, I hope that it's going to be really cool, because FFCC is doing a legacy project. So we've been kind of like watching these shows from way back in the day. Like, it's been a great trip down memory lane. But I'm just so proud of you and the stuff that you've done so far, what you continue to do, and you're a great friend, and I love you. And can't wait to see you guys live in Dayton.
Thank you.
I love it. So Andrea, I'll let you go first, and then Rick. What would you like to leave everybody with?
There's a Ted Lasso kind of quote that I think is good, but a lot of this conversation tonight has reminded me of that. But be curious and not judgmental. And I think that having conversations with other people and having these kinds of conversations, or just, real dialogue about, what we like and, what we enjoy and those kinds of things. I feel like for the longest time, especially if you kind of grew up when we did, it's really easy to say, oh, I don't like this or I don't like that, and find the negative. But I'd say flip the script and find the positive. What do you like? What do you love about this? How can you grow from this? What can you learn from that? And I think that we as a community can start to learn from each other by really being curious about, well, what did I like about that? And this is really cool. And what made that neat and what made that interesting to watch? And I think finding the curiosity about color guard and really continue to grow your passion about it is gonna I think lead to continued just the lifelong love of learning about this activity.
My final thoughts would be, and we're at the same point too in these last 3 weeks, is, whatever you can do to make the vision as clear as possible, to, in as many ways as possible. But it starts with you. Is what you're saying clear, and how clear can you make that and accessible to people? The other one is like, with your performers, is it giving them a chance to be 10 out of 10 in front of all those people? Whether that's reps, whether that's cleaning, whether that's a slight massaging of a thing, because, most importantly, everything we do is for our performers. Kind of to Andrea's point, like, don't be ashamed to reach out. We are all part of a larger community, and I'm very blessed to be friends with people like Michael and Stevo, and where we can, get on the phone or send a message and just be like, hey, and knowing that person is most likely not going to say no. They're going to probably say, I will help you however I can. And that goes out, to complete strangers. If there's something that you admire or want or would like to know, almost anyone in this activity, if you reached out to them and said, hey, could I ask you a few questions, or could you give me a little bit of your time? 100% of them would probably say yes. So never be ashamed or afraid to do that. Yeah, I think that's what I got left.
I loved it. This was so fantastic. I'm sorry, everybody watching. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions that you asked, but I appreciate everybody watching. And Rick and Andrea, thank you so much for stopping at this point in the season. Of course, Michael and Stevo, same thing. Best of luck the rest of the season in Dayton. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And if you thought this was interesting, tell them they can find it on the YouTube channel and watch it themselves. So thanks, everybody. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Mary.
Bye.